A homeless boy fixed a billionaire's car. But when she saw the wallet in his hand, she froze. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled, because that wallet belonged to her family. The Rolls-Royce Phantom coughed once, twice, then stalled in the middle of the busy Lego street. Horns blared. Pedestrians paused. Drivers muttered about the inconvenience, but none dared approach the furious woman who stepped out in heels that clicked like weapons against the marble pavement. Grace Montgomery, billionaire oil mogul, diamond earrings catching the sun, yanked off her sunglasses and snapped at her driver. "Do you call this maintenance?" The driver stammered, sweat beading under his starched collar. People whispered her name like she was royalty and executioner in one, Grace, the untouchable. Grace, the woman who crushed her rivals. Grace, who smiled only at banknotes. Yet in the crowd, one boy moved. Caleb looked barely 16, though hardship carved older lines on his face. His t-shirt was torn, jeans stained with oil, sneakers one lace away from falling apart. He crouched beside the sleek hood with the casual confidence of someone who had done this before. Though never on a car worth more than everything he had seen in his life. "I can fix it," he said softly. Grace's head whipped toward him. She let her eyes travel from his dirty fingernails to his sunken cheeks. "You." Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the noise. "This car costs more than your entire life." Caleb didn't flinch. "Still, it won't start unless someone who knows what they're doing touches it." The crowd murmured. The driver looked relieved. Grace studied the boy's eyes, sharp as flint, and for the first time in years, she felt an echo of someone she had lost long ago. Against her instincts, she gestured. "Fine. Do it. If you ruin it, you'll answer with your bones." Caleb slid under the hood. Within minutes, the growl of the Phantom purred back to life, smoother than before. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Grace stared, caught between irritation and intrigue. Then it happened. As Caleb wiped sweat from his forehead, his old leather wallet slipped from his pocket and landed open at Grace's heels. A photo peeked out, aged and cracked, a smiling man she once knew better than her own heartbeat. Grace froze. Her throat went dry. She bent, snatched the wallet, and whispered, "Where did you get this?" Caleb's eyes widened. He lunged, clutching it back like it was oxygen. "It's mine." Grace's pupils shrank. The face in the photo wasn't just anyone, it was Daniel Whitmore, her dead husband, the man whose family had ruined her, the man who had died in blood and scandal 15 years ago. The man she had buried with every piece of her broken heart. The driver frowned. "Madam, is something wrong?" Grace's lips trembled, but she masked it with steel. "Nothing," she said coldly, but her gaze lingered on Caleb. For a flash, she almost saw Daniel in him, the same defiant jaw, the same fire. She slipped her sunglasses back on, hiding eyes that suddenly betrayed fear, suspicion, and something she hadn't felt in decades, hope. "Get in," she commanded. The crowd gasped again. Grace Montgomery didn't invite anyone into her car, much less a homeless boy. Caleb shook his head. "I don't need charity." Her voice dropped, sharp as a knife sliding free. "It's not charity. It's unfinished business." The engine purred, ready to drive, but Grace wasn't going anywhere, not until she unraveled the truth behind the boy with her dead husband's face locked inside a battered wallet. The driver shifted uneasily, the crowd leaned in, and Caleb, heart pounding, realized he had just stepped into a world where one wrong word could cost him his life. Why would a billionaire tremble at the sight of a homeless boy's wallet? The driver shifted the Rolls-Royce into gear, but Grace didn't give the signal. She kept her gaze locked on Caleb, her sunglasses hiding the storm in her eyes. The wallet still burned in her memory. Daniel's face, Daniel's smile, haunted her from that crumpled photo. "Who gave you that wallet?" she asked, her voice sharp. Caleb's jaw tightened. "No one. It's mine. Been mine since I can remember. Grace leaned closer. Don't lie to me, boy. That man in the picture, do you know him? Caleb's confusion was raw, unfeigned. He's just someone. My mom never said much. She died when I was 12. His eyes flickered with a shadow of grief, and for a second Grace saw herself years ago, standing over a coffin, stripped of everything. She felt her breath catch, but she quickly smothered the weakness. Get in the car, she ordered. I said no, Caleb snapped. His voice cut through her authority like a blade, reminding her of the day she had stood before the Whitmore board, stripped of her husband, stripped of her unborn child, while his family spat on her name. Gold digger. Thief. Whore. That day, Lydia, her best friend, had been there, silent, pretending to console her while secretly holding documents she'd forged with the Whitmores to erase Grace from the will. Grace had seen the betrayal in Lydia's eyes too late. It had carved into her deeper than any financial loss. Grace blinked and Caleb came back into focus, his stance staring, his hand clutching that wallet like a lifeline. She swallowed the memory, but the ache remained. You think refusing me makes you strong, she hissed. You'll learn strength comes from survival, not pride. Caleb shot back, I've survived without you this long. A hush spread through the bystanders still lingering, watching the duel of words between billionaire and boy. The driver glanced nervously at Grace, knowing her temper was legend. She had once bankrupted a rival over an insult at a dinner party. She had once made a senator kneel publicly for underestimating her. But she didn't strike now. She studied Caleb like prey, yet something about him made her hesitate. The sharp set of his chin. The way he wouldn't cower, even with the weight of her empire pressing down. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. She leaned in until her perfume, expensive and suffocating, invaded his space. You carry a ghost in that wallet. And ghosts have a way of returning, boy. When they do, they destroy everything. Caleb blinked, caught between defiance and confusion. His fingers brushed the photo inside. He had never understood why his mother had hidden it so fiercely. Once, as a child, he had asked who the man was. She had slapped his hand away, tears in her eyes. Don't ever ask again, she had whispered. The memory still burned. The Rolls-Royce engine hummed, waiting. Grace stepped back, her mask snapping back in place. She gestured to the driver. Follow him. Wherever he goes. Caleb turned, slipping into the crowd, his shoulders hunched but his spine unbroken. Grace watched him disappear down a dusty street, and something dangerous settled in her chest. If the boy was who she suspected, then the Whitmores had lied, buried, and stolen more than she ever imagined. She pulled out her phone, dialing a number she hadn't used in years. When the voice answered, Grace's tone was venom. Find me everything about a boy named Caleb. I want bloodlines, hospital records, street files, everything. And if Lydia's fingerprints are on this. Her lips curled, cold as steel. She'll wish I had killed her 15 years ago. The driver shivered at her words. Caleb vanished into the crowd. But unseen threads were already pulling him back into Grace's world, threads of family, betrayal, and revenge that would not be cut without blood. What truth will Grace's investigation uncover, and how far will her revenge reach if Lydia is behind it? Caleb slipped away from the glimmering streets into the shadows where wealth never dared to walk. The city's neon lights bled into the narrow alleys that smelled of smoke and stale bread. Grace's driver parked a block away, headlights off, tailing silently. Grace herself sat in the back seat, her eyes narrowed behind the glass, watching every move. Caleb ducked into a collapsed warehouse, its broken windows glinting like jagged teeth. Inside, a small fire flickered, surrounded by children with faces too thin for their age. Caleb dropped a bag of bread rolls on the floor. Their eyes lit up. Eat before it gets cold, he said, forcing a smile. A little girl no older than 7 tugged his shirt. "Caleb, did you eat today?" "I had more than enough," he lied. His stomach growled in betrayal, but he ignored it. Grace leaned forward in her car seat. The boy's selflessness unsettled her. Most street rats clawed to survive, yet this one shared. Daniel had been like that too. Reckless in his generosity, giving money, trust, even his heart to people who later betrayed him. Her mind flashed to Daniel slipping an envelope of cash to a factory worker once, saying, "If we can't lift others, what's the point of wealth?" Grace had scolded him then, and now, years later, she hated herself for missing the softness she once despised. The children devoured the bread, crumbs sticking to their cheeks. Caleb sat back against the cold wall, staring at the ceiling where rain dripped through holes. His hand slipped into his wallet again, brushing the faded photo. His mother's face rose in memory, stern, exhausted, but always protective. "Mom," he whispered under his breath. "Why'd you hide the truth?" Her last night alive came flooding back. She had coughed blood into a rag, pressing the wallet into his 12-year-old hands. "Never lose this, Caleb," she had rasped. "Inside is the only proof of who you are. Promise me." He had promised, but never understood. She had died before sunrise. Grace watched, her throat tightening despite herself. She saw not a beggar, but a boy carrying secrets in silence. Secrets tied to Daniel. One of the older boys by the fire turned on Caleb. "So it's true, eh? You've been running with rich people now?" Caleb frowned. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. We saw you fixing that billionaire's car. We saw her looking at you like you're special." Jealousy dripped from the words. The boy shoved Caleb hard, knocking him against the wall. "Don't forget where you come from. Don't think you're better than us." A scuffle broke out. Caleb fought back, but there were 3 of them. Fists and boots landed. The younger kid screamed. Grace's driver shifted in alarm. "Madam, should I?" "No," Grace cut him off coldly. Her eyes glittered. "Let's see what he does." Caleb, blood dripping from his lip, staggered but refused to fall. His fists swung clumsy but desperate. Finally, he shouted, "I never asked to fix her car. I never asked for her attention. I'm one of you." His voice cracked, raw and broken. The attackers sneered, then backed off, leaving him panting, bent but unbroken. He wiped his face, sat back down, and pulled the crying little girl into his arms. "I'm not leaving you. Ever. No matter what they say." Grace exhaled slowly, something dark stirring in her chest. She had seen enough. The Whitmores had stolen her husband, her child, her life. Now she suspected they had stolen this boy's name too. And if Lydia had helped cover it? Grace's lips curved into a cold smile. Revenge wasn't just overdue. It would be brutal. As Caleb kissed the girl's forehead, Grace whispered to herself in the car, "You don't even know who you are, boy. But I'll make them all pay for hiding you." Crystal chandeliers rained light across the ballroom, where Lagos riches paraded in gowns and tailored suits. Laughter echoed off marble columns as waiters weaved through with trays of champagne. Grace Montgomery glided in, a diamond-studded serpent in human form, and behind her, awkward in borrowed clothes, walked Caleb. His hands were shoved into the pockets of a jacket 2 sizes too big, his eyes darting around like a stray cat in a palace. He hated every second of it. "Why am I here?" he muttered under his breath. Grace didn't look at him, only whispered, "Because sometimes, wolves must be tested among lions." Eyes turned. Guests murmured. "She brought a street rat," someone whispered. Another sneered, "Montgomery has finally lost her mind." Their smirks carried the same poison Grace had once tasted 15 years ago, when she stood widowed and stripped of inheritance, Lydia whispering into Whitmore's ears that Grace was never fit to belong. That night had burned into her, humiliation, the venom of betrayal, the sneers of men who thought her weak. Tonight, she wanted Caleb to feel the weight she had once carried, and to see whether he could bear it. Caleb shifted under the stairs. A portly board member approached, raising his glass. "Grace, darling, surely this is not your date?" Laughter erupted around them. Grace's smile was thin as glass. "This boy has more skill in his fingers than any of you parasites in your whole body. He fixed my car in the street while you all sat in gold towers." The man chuckled cruelly, turning to Caleb. "Is that so? Boy, fetch me another drink then. Or perhaps shine my shoes. That's what rats do, isn't it?" Caleb's jaw clenched. He should have lowered his head, swallowed the insult, survived quietly as always. But something flared in him, something that had always been there, the fire his mother could never extinguish. He stepped closer, voice steady. "I fix machines, not egos. Your shoes can stay dirty." Gasps rippled across the room. The board member's face turned crimson. "You little..." Grace's laugh cut him off, sharp and mocking. "Careful, Edwin. The boy may have just told more truth than you've heard in your lifetime." Caleb didn't understand why Grace defended him, why her eyes gleamed with something almost proud. He only knew that everyone in the room now looked at him as if he were a threat, and for the first time in his life, he didn't care. The orchestra swelled, but Grace wasn't listening. Her mind drifted back to Daniel again, to the night he had stood at a Whitmore shareholders' table and defied his father. "I won't cut the factory wages, father. Starving men won't build empires." His voice had been steady, unshaken by power. Caleb's words tonight carried that same defiance, as if Daniel's spirit had found its way back through this boy. From across the ballroom, Lydia appeared, draped in emerald silk, her smile venom-sweet. "Grace," she purred, kissing the air. Her eyes slid to Caleb and narrowed. "And who is this stray? Have you opened a charity?" Grace's hand tightened on her champagne flute until the glass nearly cracked. She remembered Lydia's forged signatures, Lydia's whispered lies that had cost her everything. Her reply was smooth, but her eyes burned. "Careful, Lydia. Strays have a way of biting when cornered." Lydia's smile faltered, but only for a moment. She turned away, but Grace saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes when they landed on Caleb. A flicker she would kill her for. Grace leaned toward Caleb, her voice soft but loaded with steel. "You see that woman? Someday soon, she'll bleed for what she did to me. And you, whether you like it or not, are part of that war." Caleb swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing on him. The chandeliers glittered overhead, but all he felt was the heat of a battlefield he never asked to walk onto. As Lydia whispered to another guest with a sly glance at Caleb, Grace's grip on her glass tightened. Tonight was only the beginning, of revelation, of revenge, and of blood. The gala carried on with forced laughter and clinking glasses, but Grace's mind had left the ballroom. Every smile Lydia flashed, every whisper in the corner, pulled her back to the night her world collapsed. She tightened her grip on the stem of her glass until her knuckles turned white. Caleb noticed, leaning closer. "Why do you hate her so much?" Grace didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Lydia. "Because once, I thought she was my sister." The orchestra's strings swelled, but in Grace's head another sound rose, rain pounding on a church roof the night of Daniel's funeral. She had stood in black silk, swollen with grief, clutching the papers Daniel had left behind. She thought she still had her husband's protection, even in death. But then Lydia appeared, holding another set of papers, dripping with ink and betrayal. "Grace, darling, sign these," Lydia had whispered, her voice sweet as poison. "It's just a formality." Grace had hesitated, but the Whitmore patriarch's glare had pinned her in place. "You'll sign, or you'll leave with nothing." She remembered Daniel's father's voice thundering through the hall, "You were never one of us." Her hands had shaken. Lydia's had been steady, guiding the pen. Later Grace discovered the truth. Those papers were forged, stripping her of every claim, every inheritance, every shred of Daniel's empire. Grace's glass cracked in her grip, a fine line running up the stem. Caleb startled. "Careful, you'll cut yourself." Her laugh was cold. "I cut myself a long time ago, boy. This scar never healed." On the dance floor, Lydia twirled in emerald silk, the same color she had worn that night 15 years ago. The same smile. The same deceit hidden behind painted lips. Grace's chest burned with it. Caleb's brow furrowed. "She betrayed you." Grace finally looked at him. "She didn't just betray me. She buried me alive. She and the Whitmores made me a ghost. They thought they'd killed me by taking everything. But ghosts don't stay dead." Her words sent a chill through Caleb, though he couldn't explain why. He glanced at Lydia, then back at Grace, and for the first time, he wondered if he had stepped into something far more dangerous than a ballroom of billionaires. A waiter passed, offering fresh glasses. Grace set her broken one down, took another, and raised it, not in toast, but in mockery. She whispered so only Caleb could hear, "Someday soon, she'll choke on her own lies. And when she does, I'll be the one holding the rope." Caleb swallowed hard, unease prickling at his skin. He wanted to ask more, but something inside him warned not to. Instead he muttered, "That's not justice. That's revenge." Grace finished for him. She smiled without joy. "Justice is for the innocent. I stopped being innocent the day Daniel's blood stained my hands." Caleb froze. "Blood?" Her gaze sharpened, realizing too late what she had admitted. She turned away, sipping her champagne as though the word hadn't slipped. But Caleb's mind raced. She wasn't speaking figuratively, he could feel it. Somewhere in her past, Grace had bled, and maybe spilled blood too. From across the room, Lydia's laugh rang out again. Grace's eyes narrowed, and in that single look Caleb saw it. Hatred sharpened into purpose, pain honed into a blade. This wasn't about wealth anymore. This was about war. As Lydia whispered to a board member, her eyes cutting back to Caleb, Grace leaned in close, her perfume overwhelming. "Stay close to me, boy. Because when the noose tightens around her neck, you'll want to see it with your own eyes." The orchestra shifted into a slow waltz. Couples glided across the marble floor, their laughter ringing as though the world had never known hunger. Caleb stood awkwardly at the edge, tugging at the sleeves of the jacket Grace had thrown on him. He felt every eye on him, every whisper like a knife. "There he is," one woman muttered behind her jeweled fan. "The boy who eats out of bins. Grace Montgomery's new pet." Laughter followed, and Caleb's ears burned. A young heir, slick hair shining with oil, raised his glass toward Caleb. "Tell me, boy," he called across the room, "did you polish those shoes yourself or did the trash give them to you already shining?" The guests roared. Caleb clenched his fists. He wanted to lunge, but his mother's voice echoed faintly in memory, "Never fight where you can't win. Survive first, then strike when they least expect." He lowered his head, but his silence only emboldened them. Another guest sneered, "Grace, dear, this is beneath you. Surely you've not fallen so low as to parade garbage in silk." Caleb's chest heaved. He remembered nights curled on cardboard, rain soaking him to the bone. He remembered clutching his mother's wallet to his chest like it could shield him. And he remembered the day she died, whispering, "You're more than they'll ever know." Grace's lips pressed tight. The scene mirrored her past too vividly, the night the Whitmores mocked her after Daniel's death, their laughter slicing deeper than the ink on the forged papers Lydia had forced into her hand. She had swallowed her rage that night, powerless. She would never allow that humiliation again, not for herself, and not for this boy. She stepped forward, her heels clicking like gunshots across the marble. The laughter stilled. She slid an arm around Caleb's shoulders and pulled him closer, her diamond bracelets flashing under the chandelier. Her voice rang, cold and sharp. "This boy," she declared, "fixed my Rolls-Royce in the street while the rest of you couldn't fix a shoelace. He has skill you'll never buy, courage you'll never earn, and a will none of you parasites could ever crush." A ripple moved through the room. Lydia's smile faltered, the glass in her hand trembling just slightly. She remembered Daniel too, the way he once defended workers in front of his father, his voice burning with the same fire Caleb now carried. Lydia's eyes narrowed. Could it be? Caleb looked up at Grace, stunned. No one had ever defended him, not once. Why are you helping me?" he whispered. Her reply was quiet, meant only for him. "Because I see him in you." Caleb frowned. "Who?" Grace hesitated, pain flashing across her face. Daniel's face rose in her mind, blood on his shirt, lifeless eyes that still haunted her dreams. She swallowed hard. "Someone I once loved. Someone they stole from me." The guests watched, unsettled by Grace's unusual display of warmth. But beneath her arm, Caleb felt her body taut as a drawn bowstring. Her kindness was not weakness, it was strategy, a blade hidden in velvet. "Let them laugh," she whispered in his ear, her smile never faltering. "One day, boy, we'll watch them choke on it." Lydia turned away too quickly, pretending indifference. But Grace caught the flicker of recognition in her eyes again, and this time she knew. Lydia had seen the resemblance. Lydia suspected. That meant the game was accelerating. As applause reluctantly broke out, Grace leaned closer, her hand gripping Caleb's shoulder like iron. "Stay with me, Caleb. Because if I'm right, you're not just a boy from the streets. You're the key to my revenge." The gala lights faded behind them, but Grace didn't return Caleb to the street. Instead, her convoy of black cars rolled through the city and stopped before a mansion that rose like a fortress above the skyline. Its gates opened without a word, guards bowing their heads as though saluting a queen. Caleb shifted uneasily in the leather seat, staring at the marble walls and fountains beyond the gates. "This isn't where I belong," he muttered. Grace's eyes flicked to him. "You belong exactly where I say you belong." She led him inside, the chandelier overhead glittering like a galaxy. Caleb's feet sank into carpets thicker than any mattress he'd ever slept on. His gaze darted from the gold-framed paintings to the polished piano in the corner. He touched nothing, as though afraid his fingerprints might soil the air. Grace poured herself a drink, her hands steadier now, her mask firmly back in place. "Eat," she commanded, gesturing to the long dining table laid with untouched food. Caleb hesitated, then sat slowly, tearing into bread with the hunger of someone who hadn't eaten properly in weeks. Grace watched in silence, the faintest shadow of Daniel in every movement, the way his jaw clenched when he chewed, the way his eyes darted when he felt exposed. Her phone buzzed. She answered quickly, her tone low. "Talk." On the other end, her investigator spoke. "We dug into the boy. Caleb. No official father listed. But there's more. Daniel Whitmore set aside a trust, untouchable, hidden from the family board. It was meant for his bloodline. Unclaimed for 15 years. Grace's chest tightened, though she masked it with a sip of wine. The trust. She remembered Daniel's stubbornness, his defiance of his father, the night he had whispered in their bedroom, "If they try to erase you, Grace, I'll make sure our child, or any child of mine, never starves." She had brushed him off then, thinking it was just words. Now those words had become a ghost reaching back through time. "Send me the full files," she said. "Names, dates, signatures. I want proof." Yes, madam. She ended the call, slipping the mask back on before Caleb looked up from his plate. You're lucky, she said smoothly. Not many people get to sit here. Caleb frowned. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Her gaze softened just slightly, the kind of softness that cut sharper than cruelty. Maybe I don't, she said. But I know what it means to be cornered, to be mocked, to have everything stolen and left to rot. That, I know too well. Her voice trembled at the edges, and for a flicker, the mask cracked. Caleb saw not just a billionaire but a woman with scars invisible to the eye. He set the bread down slowly. They did that to you? Grace laughed bitterly. They thought they buried me. They forgot that some women grow teeth in the grave. Her words sent a chill through him. He couldn't tell if she was promising survival or vengeance. Grace stood, circling the table until she stood behind him. Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder, warm yet heavy as iron. Eat well, Caleb. Rest. Because tomorrow, the ghosts will start to rise. And when they do, I need you strong. Caleb looked up at her, confusion clouding his eyes. Strong for what? Her lips curved into the faintest smile, eyes cold as steel. For war. The trust fund was real, Caleb was blood, and Lydia's days were numbered. Grace knew it now, and she would use the boy as both shield and sword in the revenge she had waited 15 years to unleash. The mansion's warmth clung to Caleb like a second skin, but he peeled it off the moment he stepped back into the streets the next evening. He had insisted on returning to the warehouse, to the fire where the children huddled. Grace had watched him go without protest, though her eyes lingered longer than they should have, as though measuring his strength against a storm she knew was coming. The warehouse was quiet when he entered, the fire reduced to embers. The children stirred, their eyes lighting up at the sight of him. But 3 older boys emerged from the shadows, their faces sharp with suspicion. You, one of them spat, shoving Caleb back against the wall. You think you can just walk back here after being carried off in her car? Caleb shoved him off. I didn't ask for her car. I didn't ask for her help. Another boy sneered. We saw you. Eating her food. Wearing her clothes. Sleeping under her roof. You left us to rot while you dined like a king. The words cut deeper than fists. Caleb remembered nights when he split stale bread in half, lying that he'd eaten earlier so the younger ones could swallow something. He remembered his mother's last words, never forget where you come from. Now those very words were turned against him. They circled him. One swung, his fist cracking Caleb's jaw. Another kicked him in the ribs. Caleb fell to his knees, blood dripping onto the concrete. The children screamed, but no one dared move. I'm not one of them. Caleb roared through clenched teeth. I'm still one of you. The blows didn't stop. His body curled to shield himself, but he refused to let go of the wallet clutched in his hand. It was his anchor, his only proof of belonging to someone, though he still didn't know who. From the street outside, headlights swept into the warehouse. Grace stepped out, her heels clicking against gravel, her bodyguard at her side. She didn't shout. She didn't run. She simply walked in, her presence freezing the room. The older boys staggered back, their fury folding into fear. Grace's gaze fell on Caleb, bruised and bleeding, still clutching his wallet like a dying man holds a cross. She knelt, brushing dirt from his cheek with fingers that smelled of perfume and power. Did I not tell you, Caleb, she whispered, her voice soft yet razor-sharp, you can't survive with ghosts alone. Caleb blinked through blood, his voice breaking. They think I betrayed them. Her eyes flicked to the boys, who trembled under her stare. She stood, her height and authority suffocating the air. Betrayal, she said, her voice ringing in the hollow warehouse, is a word spoken by cowards who've never lost everything. If he betrayed you, then I am your enemy too. The boys looked at each other, unsure whether to kneel or run. Grace didn't wait for an answer. She pulled Caleb to his feet, her arms sliding under his shoulder, steadying him as though he were made of glass. As they walked out, Caleb whispered, "Why do you keep helping me?" Her reply was a blade dipped in honey. "Because helping you helps me. And because those who mocked me once will choke when they see whose side you stand on." In her mind, the image burned clear, Lydia's smirk wiped away in horror, the Whitmore's empire collapsing, their legacy shattered by the very boy they tried to erase. Caleb didn't know it yet, but he was no longer just a street survivor. He was Grace's weapon, and she would sharpen him until he cut through the past itself. As they stepped into the night, Caleb leaned on her, but Grace's eyes blazed forward. The revenge she had waited 15 years to unleash was no longer hers alone, it was theirs. The mansion was silent that night, except for Caleb's ragged breathing as he lay on the velvet couch, bruises darkening across his skin. Grace stood over him, pressing a cold cloth to his cheek with surprising gentleness. For a woman whose name alone made board members quake, her touch was steady, almost maternal. Caleb winced but didn't pull away. Why do you keep doing this?" His voice cracked, not from pain but from something deeper. "I'm nothing to you." Grace studied his face, the stubborn line of his jaw, the unyielding fire even in weakness. "Daniel's fire." Her hand froze, and she whispered before she could stop herself, "You're not nothing. You're everything they tried to erase." He looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Her gaze drifted to the window where the city lights glowed like 1,000 accusing eyes. She saw Lydia there, saw the Whitmores, saw the night they buried her alive without a coffin. And for the first time in years, she let someone else glimpse the wound. "They stripped me," she began, her voice low and bitter. "Not just of money, but of dignity. After Daniel died, I was supposed to inherit a share of the empire. He wanted me secure, wanted me safe. But his father hated me. The Whitmores called me a parasite." "Lydia," Grace's throat caught, but rage steadied her. "Lydia was my closest friend. She pretended to fight for me. In truth, she forged the very papers that stole my claim. She handed me to the wolves." Caleb blinked, the weight of her words sinking like stone. He remembered Lydia's smile at the gala, the way her eyes had lingered on him with something sharper than curiosity. Now it made sense, at least partly. Grace turned back to him, her eyes burning. "Do you know what it's like to stand in a room where everyone you trusted laughs as your world collapses? To hear them toast to your downfall while your unborn child dies inside you from the stress?" Her hand shook for a moment. She closed her eyes, and the memory came unbidden, blood on silk sheets, doctors shaking their heads, Lydia's hand stroking hers while whispering "You'll be fine," knowing full well she had orchestrated it all. Caleb sat up despite the pain, stunned. "They took everything from you." "Yes." Her voice was steel. "But I took it back. Brick by brick, deal by deal, I built this empire myself. And now," she leaned in closer, her perfume filling his lungs. "Now I will take theirs apart piece by piece. And you," she touched his bruised chest lightly. "You will stand beside me when I do." His head spun. "Why me?" Grace's lips curved into a faint, haunting smile. "Because you remind me of Daniel. Because you carry something in you that terrifies them. And because, Caleb," she let the words hang, not yet ready to confess the bloodline truth. "You're mine now. As much as they tried to erase me, they will not erase you." Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, a storm crawling over the city. Caleb looked at her, torn between gratitude and fear. "What happens when they find out about me?" Grace's eyes hardened, gleaming with a promise. "Then we stop asking what happens. We make it happen. And when it does, they'll wish they never touched me, never touched Daniel, never touched you." Caleb lay back, the storm rattling the windows, and wondered if Grace's kindness was salvation, or the chain pulling him into a war that could consume them both. The ballroom glittered again the following week, this time for a charity auction hosted by Lydia herself. Grace arrived in black satin, her diamonds catching every flicker of light like shards of ice. Caleb followed behind in a pressed suit that still felt like chains. He hated the way people stared, but Grace's hand on his shoulder pushed him forward, steady and commanding. Lydia greeted them at the entrance with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Her gaze slid over Caleb, lingered, and narrowed. "Well, Grace," she purred, "you've brought him again. How curious." Grace's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Curiosity is healthy, Lydia. It keeps the mind sharp." Inside, champagne flowed, paintings were paraded, and the city's elite whispered behind manicured hands. Caleb tried to keep to the edges, but Lydia's voice rang out across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the bidding, I'd like to share something rather interesting." She gestured toward Caleb, and the spotlight followed. He froze as dozens of eyes turned his way. Lydia's tone dripped with venom masked as playfulness. "This boy, doesn't he look familiar to anyone? Look closely. The eyes, the jawline. Doesn't he remind you of someone we all once knew?" The crowd murmured, puzzled at first. Then someone whispered, "Daniel Whitmore." The name spread like wildfire, gasps and whispers swelling into a wave. Caleb's chest tightened. He looked at Grace, who hadn't moved, her face a mask of calm. But inside, her blood boiled. She had always known Lydia would strike like this, in public, with a smile, turning whispers into weapons. Caleb's knees wavered under the weight of those stares. His whole life he'd fought to be invisible, and now he was being dissected under crystal chandeliers. "What is she talking about?" he whispered hoarsely. Grace stepped forward, her voice slicing through the noise. "What she's doing," she said coldly, "is grasping at ghosts. Because she knows the dead never stay buried." The murmurs deepened. Lydia smirked, swirling her glass of champagne. "Oh, Grace. Always so dramatic. But perhaps we should show them, yes?" She snapped her fingers. An assistant brought forward an old portrait of Daniel, projected onto a screen behind her. His features, strong, defiant, unmistakable, cast shadows across the room. And beside him, Caleb's resemblance was undeniable. Gasps turned to shocked silence. Caleb's breath caught, his hand instinctively going to the wallet in his pocket. The faded photograph. The one his mother had told him never to lose. Grace moved, placing herself between Caleb and the screen. Her eyes burned into Lydia's. "If you think exposing him will shame me, you've forgotten who I am. You stole my inheritance, you killed my child, and now you want to erase Daniel's blood too? Not this time." The room held its breath. Caleb's hands shook. He whispered, barely audible, "Daniel, my father." Grace's eyes softened for the first time all night. She didn't say yes, but she didn't need to. The truth hung heavy in the silence, undeniable. Lydia raised her glass in mock victory. "Well. It seems the past has returned. But beware, Grace, ghosts destroy more than they save." Grace's smile returned, colder than steel. "Then I'll burn the whole house down before I let you touch him again." The audience erupted in whispers, phones already buzzing with gossip. Caleb's world spun, torn between shock, fear, and a strange, aching hope. For the first time, he wasn't just a boy from the streets. He was Daniel's son. And that meant he was at the center of a war far larger than he had ever imagined. As Lydia raised her glass, satisfied, Grace leaned close to Caleb, her whisper shaking with both fury and promise. "They think this revelation weakens us. They've just signed their death warrant." The auction had ended in chaos, whispers chasing Caleb like shadows long after the last champagne glass was drained. Back at the mansion, silence pressed heavy over the marble halls. Caleb sat alone by the fire, his wallet open on his lap, the faded photograph trembling in his hands. Daniel's face stared back at him, not just from the portrait Lydia had shown but from the eyes in the mirror. Grace entered quietly, though her presence filled the room like smoke. She poured herself a drink, her bracelets clinking softly against the glass. For a long time, neither spoke. Caleb's voice finally cracked the silence. "Is it true?" Grace didn't answer at once. She watched the flames curl and snap, remembering the night Lydia handed her forged papers, the same night she lost both her child and her claim. Back then, she had begged Daniel's father for mercy, only to be told she was a mistake to be erased. Her silence now wasn't hesitation, it was rage ripening into strategy. Caleb's hands balled into fists. "All my life, I thought my father was just gone. My mother never told me anything. She made me swear to keep this wallet safe, but she never explained why. And now strangers are staring at me like I'm some ghost." He looked up at Grace, his eyes blazing. "I deserve the truth." Grace set her glass down, the sound sharp against the table. She crossed to him, her heels echoing like verdicts. "The truth," she said softly, "is dangerous. Lydia used it tonight because she knows what truth can do. It can crown you, or it can crush you. And she intends to crush you with it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then why not crown me first?" Her lips curved, not in humor but in admiration of his fire. "Because you're not ready to wear it. They'll devour you alive if you step into that arena unprepared." Her words carried the weight of memory. She saw herself years ago, young and proud, standing before the Whitmore's board with Daniel's ring still warm on her finger. She had thought love was enough to shield her. But Lydia's betrayal and the family's cruelty had taught her otherwise. That night, she had been unprepared, and they had feasted on her ruin. She placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder, firm, grounding. "I won't let them do to you what they did to me." He searched her face, desperate. "Then what happens now?" Her eyes hardened, cold as a blade unsheathed. "Now, we strike first. Lydia believes she's exposed you, but all she's done is reveal her own fear. She sees Daniel in you, and it terrifies her. That fear is our weapon." Caleb's chest rose and fell, torn between fear and resolve. "And if I'm really his son?" Grace leaned closer, her whisper a vow. "Then you're not just a boy from the streets. Your blood. Your legacy. And together, we'll make them pay for every night you slept in the cold, for every coin they stole from me, for every life they ruined." A storm cracked outside, thunder shaking the windows. In the flash of lightning, Caleb saw it clearly for the first time. The woman before him wasn't just his protector. She was a queen sharpening her sword. And he was the blade she intended to wield. As the thunder rolled, Grace whispered the words that sealed their bond, "Sleep, Caleb. Tomorrow we begin building the fire. And when it burns, Lydia will be the first to scream." The Whitmore Estate's annual shareholders gathering was meant to be untouchable. Cameras lined the driveway, reporters jostled for glimpses of Lydia in her silver gown as she basked in the glow of flashing bulbs. But Grace had chosen this night for war, and Caleb walked at her side like a shadow reborn in fire. Inside the gilded hall, Lydia stood before the podium, smiling as she spoke of legacy, wealth, and the purity of the Whitmore bloodline. Her words dripped with venom disguised as pride. The board applauded, their rings catching the chandelier's light, the same hands that had signed away Grace's inheritance years ago. Grace rose from her seat, her voice slicing through the applause. "Shall we test the purity of that bloodline tonight, Lydia?" The room stilled. Caleb felt his chest tighten, but Grace's hand pressed against his back, urging him forward. He stepped into the light, his bruises still fresh, his eyes blazing with Daniel's defiance. The murmurs began instantly, gasps, whispers, frantic calculations. Lydia's smile faltered. Dragging your stray off the street doesn't make him one of us. Caleb pulled the wallet from his pocket, the photograph trembling in his grip. This was all I had, he said, his voice raw. She thought I was dirt, but I bled in the streets with Daniel Whitmore's face staring back at me every time I looked in a mirror. Grace's allies moved. The investigators she had hired unveiled documents on the screen behind them. Daniel's trust fund sealed 15 years ago, his signature unmistakable. The board leaned forward, shocked. Grace's voice thundered over them. Daniel prepared for this moment. He knew you would betray him. He hid his heir where your poison could never reach, on the streets, among the people you sneered at. Caleb's throat tightened. For the first time, he didn't feel like a ghost. He felt like fire. Lydia's mask cracked. Forgery. Lies, she spat, though her hands trembled on the podium. Grace stepped closer, her heels echoing like war drums. Do you want to speak of lies, Lydia? Shall I remind them how you forged the papers that erased my name? How you whispered trust me as I buried Daniel's child, only to sell me to his enemies the very next day? Gasps shook the hall. The board members shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Grace's fury and Lydia's pale face. Lydia's voice broke, but she tried to sneer. You think you can destroy me with words? Grace's smile was deadly. Not with words. With truth. With proof. With blood. She snapped her fingers. Security she had bought out in secret swarmed the hall, turning Lydia's fortress into her prison. Caleb's heart raced as Grace handed him the microphone. This is your legacy. Speak. His voice shook but did not falter. I slept in alleys while my father's empire rotted under thieves. I starved while you toasted your wealth. No more. This ends tonight. The room erupted, some shouting, some applauding, some scrambling to distance themselves from Lydia. Phones streamed it live, the city was already watching. Grace leaned close to Lydia, her whisper a dagger. You killed my child. You tried to erase me. Now watch as the world erases you. Lydia was dragged from the podium, her screams echoing down the marble halls. Grace stood tall, her hand resting lightly on Caleb's shoulder, her vengeance complete. But as the cameras flashed, Caleb whispered, almost to himself, I didn't just fix her car. I fixed my life. Grace's eyes glistened, though she blinked the tears away before they could fall. No, Caleb. You didn't fix your life. You started a new one. And together, we'll build an empire they can never burn again. The crowd's roar filled the hall, half in shock, half in awe. The boy who had once been invisible now stood at the center of history. The woman who had been erased now owned the stage. And the ones who thought they had buried them were now buried themselves, under truth, under proof, under revenge. Final beat, Grace and Caleb walked out of the Whitmore estate into the storm, not as outcasts but as heirs of fire. The war was over, and the empire was theirs.